About this and the potential ramifications that comes from this. Lynn Sweet, Washington bureau chief for the Chicago Sun-Times, back with us. All right, so Lynn, we know on the campaign trail, Donald Trump had promised that there would be a ban of all Muslims. There were modifications of language along the way. Executive Order number 14 signed last night, and already it being put into practice. But we're seeing, whether it be at JFK and perhaps other places, there is some confusion about who this applies to. And now we hear from the White House that it also includes those who are green card holders. If you are from any of these 7 nations and you have a green card, you are not going to be able to re-enter the U.S., at least for now. I'm talking about Yemen, Sudan, Somalia, Iraq, Syria, Libya, and Iran. So, Lynn, what are the signals being sent from this White House thus far?
Well, Frederica, if this involves green card holders, then we're talking about a vast, bigger universe of people than just the smaller number of people who might have been caught up in this situation in transit, which would mean it would be just a day or so. There are many, many more. Green card means that you are in the United States legally. And now I would bet that this also then would be subject to a lawsuit if it includes green card holders, because it is, legally would be a different status of people than people who are just entering the United States through the refugee program.
And so, Lynn, does the interpretation mean that there's an erasing then of all State Department, executed policies as it pertains to, because it's the body that would be involved in the granting of visas, whether it was, emergency status, where there's this 2-year vetting of number of people coming from places like Iraq, people who have been involved working with the U.S. military, whose lives are threatened, they are vetted, even those from Syria. And then those who have green cards, it's a different type of status and vetting. So does this mean that all of those standards have been erased and it's start over after perhaps that, a 60-day, 90-day period has passed?
You ask such great questions. I don't know, but this isn't just a matter, I hope people think about it this way, of just visas. And I understand that President Trump, as one of your earlier guests said, was elected on this policy, but I think perhaps more apt would be a discussion of the longstanding United States policy on refugees. It was born out of World War II. It was born out of the United States not taking in Jewish refugees who were the victims of Nazi persecution when they had to be turned back. So there's historical precedence, especially when you're talking about the category of people, as you've been addressing throughout your show today, who are people who have been helping the United States. So it is still so much to sort out here, Frederica. It's not one size fits all when you're talking about people not being allowed in the United States because of their country of origin or because they have been legally allowed to be here under our green card system.
All right, so Lynn, hold on. We've got another significant development coming from the White House. I want to bring in our Ryan Nobles, who is there at the White House. What else is happening, Ryan?
Well, Frederica, there's obviously a lot of confusion as to exactly how this executive order is impacting green card holders. And we're getting some clarification not only from the Department of Homeland Security, but also from officials here at the White House. And essentially, what they're telling us is that, for the most part, if you are a green card holder from one of these 7 countries impacted by the executive order, initially you will be denied access back to the United States. However, there is a process where you can apply for a waiver and an exemption that will be reviewed by the Department of Homeland Security and then approved or denied on a case-by-case basis. The problem, though, is that sources within DHS are telling us that they're not exactly sure how that process is going to work. Keep in mind, this executive order is barely 24 hours old, so there is a lot that has to be worked through in terms of that process. So for the most part, if you do have a green card, initially, as we said before, you will not be granted access back into the United States. But there is a process to apply to get back into the U.S. But we should point out, Frederica, that if you're a green card holder here in the U.S., you've already gone through a very thorough vetting by the United States government to even have access to that green card. So it's not exactly clear what secondary level of vetting will be required by the Department of Homeland Security to assure that these residents of the United States are able to come back here to this country. That's something that's still not clear and still something we're trying to figure out from not only the Department of Homeland Security, but here at the White House as well.
Right, that's provoked another couple questions for I wonder, is Lynn Sweet still with us?
There.
Hey, so Lynn, so let me ask you, usually, I mean, you've been covering Washington for a very long time, and just listening further what Ryan was saying, customarily when there's an executive order, and it will involve a number of agencies, this is Homeland Security, State Department, Department of Justice, usually are there a set of instructions or, a fanning out of instructions on how this would be executed before an executive order would actually be honored? It almost sounds like, based on what, Ryan, you were saying, people haven't sorted out yet. It's been in reverse, the executive order, and then instructions will come to follow. How is it usually done?
Well, it would have a little more, it would have been much preparation time, especially when it goes to the Class 2, the treatment of people with green card holders. Now, I just got, and I'm sure Ryan did, or he might have been there, there was a briefing of 4 reporters at the White House today. And here's what's interesting, because so one of the story lines here right now is that this was unfolded in an organized way. So the White House is saying that they're thanking the state and Homeland Security for all for the conversations between the officials about the executive order for many weeks. But I think this green card issue, and forgive me for looking down because I am reading the poll report, these green card holders in the United States will have to meet with a consular officer before leaving the country. Okay, so this is something that is a surprise because I don't know if we necessarily took the discussion about refugees being allowed in the country to be extended, Frederica, to people here legally with a green card.
Okay, hold tight, Ryan and Lynn. Thanks so much. I want to also get some reaction coming from the Middle East. CNN senior international correspondent Nick Payton-Walsh is in Beirut for us. So, Nick, all right, it looks like we're having a problem with our signal, and that happens. So, Ryan, back to you then. You had mentioned people with the green cards. When they're trying to make their way back into the United States, they may initially be denied. They have to apply for a waiver. Oftentimes when people leave, go outside of country, even if they have their green card, they don't have all the other information. They're not traveling with that information that allowed them to get their green card in the first place. So if they're now residing in the U.S., they left all that stuff. What's the expectation, or have we been getting any more detail from the White House as to, what will that reapplication process entail?
Well, Frederica, I don't think you need to look any further than what is actually happening in airports around the world and here in the United States. It's clear that people with green cards are having a difficult time getting on planes and getting back here to the United States. There are anecdotal reports of some people being able to get on planes and other reports of people not being able to get on planes. So when Lynn talks about the administration, and you're right, Athena Jones was in that briefing that was just taken place by White House officials, when they talk about this being conducted in a very thought out and organized way, at this point, and it is early on in the wake of this executive order, there really isn't a lot of evidence of that. I mean, when you talk to the airlines, a number of major airlines have reported that they're still trying to figure out how this applies to them and their travelers. I mean, for instance, on the Qatar Airways website, they put a link to the U.S. Customs and Border Enforcement website for more information, and there's no information at all about this new executive order on that website. So there certainly seems to be an information gap between the administration officials that have put this in place and then the actual people who are impacted by it. And those are the questions that are going to have to be answered here over the next couple of days.
Excellent. All right, thanks so much for that information. Ryan, let's try Beirut again. Nick Payton-Walsh is there. So, Nick, there you are. How is this being received? What are people saying about the order?
Well, the most vociferous reaction we've heard, Frederica, so far is from Iran, who have called this, quote, an insult and, quote, a gift to extremists. Now, obviously, they're one of the 7 countries within that ban here, one which the United States has had an incredibly complex and volatile relation with, outright hostile much of the time. But there are many key areas after the nuclear agreement, where they seem to be often on the same side, at times fighting ISIS in Iraq and Syria, where there was growing potential for cooperation. But also, it's interesting to see how Iran has chosen to frame praised this executive order, quote, as a decision to restrict travel for Muslims. Now, that is often how it's being perceived in this part of the world. Those 7 countries, Muslim majority, not of course all the countries that have Muslim majorities affected by this order at all, but it's being perceived specifically as targeting that particular religion. I think some here too will see an absence of logic. Donald Trump did cite 9/11 as one of the reasons behind this, but the vast preponderance of attackers in that particular terrorist attack, the worst on US soil, were from Saudi Arabia, not impacted by this ban either. Neither is Afghanistan or Pakistan, where there have been many terror ties in the past too. So very specific nations targeted here, and the broader indefinite ban against Syrian refugees I think will be taken by those inside the country who've long looked for US assistance in their fight against the Assad regime as yet another slight against them too. And I think many reeling at this point from the broad confusion this executive order has sown. As you heard just earlier on, there are people with green cards, some being allowed back in, some not being allowed back in. Many people worried, frankly, to even try to fly to the United States in case, for example, they land and then they refuse travel and they have a black mark against their name. Fear here predominantly, I think fear what this means from the new White House in terms of its policy towards the Middle East, but also for those who have very close relationships to the United States here. And I think what comes to mind here is that dangerous belief that complex problems potentially have very simple solutions. This is what might be perceived to be the simplest possible solution: ban a bunch of people from a bunch of particular countries that have ties at times, rarely, to terrorism, but that doesn't anywhere near get towards solving the complex issue of jihad, terrorism here in this particularly volatile region, how that sometimes rarely leads back to attacks from the United States. Frederica?
All right, Nick Payton, Walsh in Beirut, thank you so much. We were talking about those bunch of countries, Yemen, Sudan, Somalia, Iraq, Syria, Libya, and Iran. All right, meantime, a U.S. congressman representing New York says 11 now travelers are still being detained at JFK Airport in the wake of President Trump's order banning travel and immigration from several of those mostly Muslim majority countries. Another detainee, an Iraqi who worked for the U.S. in Iraq, was released just over an hour ago. Here he is.
I have a special immigration visa in my passport, me and my family, because I work with the U.S. government. I support the U.S. government for the other side of the war. But when I came here, they said no, and they treat me as I break the rules or do something wrong. I surprised, really.
All right, I want to bring back now CNN's Rachel Crane. She was out there and remains there at JFK. So, Rachel, a lot of people have turned up, many of whom are protesting this executive order. What are you experiencing there?
That's right, Fred. As you can see behind me, a sizable protest has gathered about 200 people demanding the release of these remaining 11 detainees. Now, unclear the status of when they will be released, if they will be released, where they originate from, where they were coming from. But as he pointed out, Darwish now released. When he came out, when he was released, of course, incredibly happy. He said that he had not slept all night long. He had been traveling with his family, his wife, and 3 children. Yet he was the only one of his family members that was detained. And as Congressman Nadler pointed out, that to him highlighted the arbitrary nature of this executive order. But take a listen to what Darwish had to say upon release.
This is the humanity. This is the soul of the America. Now this is what pushed me to move, leave my country and come here. And I'm very, very thankful to all the people who come to support me. Thank you very much. And always, when we are kids till now, we know America is the land of freedom. The land of freedom, the land of the right. So this is what pushed me to come here. And I'm very thankful. And I'm very happy. Really, I forget what I face and what will happen to me.
He went on to praise America, to say how much he loved America, and when asked what his message was for Donald Trump, he actually said that he liked Donald Trump, that he was just unclear about this policy. Fred?
Right, and on the people, he said, you're the greatest people in the world, people here in the United States. All right, Rachel Crane, thank you so much from JFK. Keep us posted there. All right, coming up, what does all of this mean for immigrants traveling abroad, and what about foreign nationals working for the U.S.? We'll discuss all of that with my panel next.